Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally getting a chance to use the new Some Bunny stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. This came out with their March 2017 card kit, which sold out in less than a day. However, they restocked the stamp set really quickly. As of filming this and doing the voiceover, it's still available. So I took the 4 main images from the set and I stamped them onto some post-it tape just with Simon Says Stamp's intense black ink. It doesn't really matter what ink you stamp this in. I'm just creating masks with all of these. And I love the post-it tape for this because then I have that sticky across the entire back of the image, just making my life so much easier. And these images are super easy to create masks for because it's just simple cutting. So when I'm cutting my masks, I usually keep my scissors straight, like out from me, and then I move the paper. It just creates a smoother cut. Usually not as big of a deal with masks. It's when you're fussy cutting images that you need to pay a little more attention. And I also cut just slightly inside the line or right in the middle of the line if it's a thicker lined image. That creates a better mask so that you don't end up with ghosting around the outside edges of your images when you're masking them. So hopefully that makes sense. So I masked all of these images, or created all these masks for these images, and the last 3 were super simple. And then the little chick, I just cut out the body, didn't worry about the legs. No point trying to trim those out. So once I'm done trimming everything out, I have some Canson XL watercolor paper that I trimmed down to, it was 5.5 inches tall, roughly around 3 inches wide, I'm not exactly sure. And I'm putting this in my mini Misty. And nice thing too about masks is it enables you to kind of create your own scene. You can lay them all out and figure out where you want to put everything, which is what I did here. I had a rough idea in my head, but I wanted to make sure it was going to translate onto the paper. So I lined up my bunny first. Whatever image you want in the foreground, front and center when you're masking, that's the one you want to stamp first. So with this, it was the bunny. So I inked it up with that same Simon Says Stamp intense black ink. And this is where the Misty is super helpful because I'm stamping on watercolor paper. It does have that little bit of texture. And when I'm using just regular inks and not embossing, I usually have to stamp more than once. So I stamped it twice and then I'm going to mask the bunny off. And now I'm going to create my little pile of Easter eggs here. So again, just kind of lining them up, figuring out where I want them to be and how I want them to look. And then I'm going to just line one up, stamp it, mask it off, and then go on to the next one. So when I did this, because I was double stamping more often than not, I actually ended up saturating one of the masks and got a few smudges on one of the striped eggs. But in the end, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to redo all this. I'm just going to color over it and we'll just pretend it's not there. Because yeah, that does happen sometimes because masking paper and say like the post-it paper like this, masking paper in general, regular sticky notes, they're just thinner. So you do need to watch for that sometimes if you overuse them. If I saved all my masks, the ink will have dried on them so I can use them again, but it's just something to be aware of, I guess. So once I've kind of started getting the stack as high as I wanted, once that last one is stamped, I can finally stamp my little chick on the top. So I didn't need the mask for him, but like I said, I'm going to save all these masks. Once I'm done with them, I just stick them onto the backing sheet of the stamp set. So the next time I go to use this, I have all these masks done, cut out, can reuse them. Saves me a ton of time. So I'm done all of my stamping and masking, so now I can get on to coloring. So I'm going to use my Zig Clean Color Real Brush Markers again. I know I've been using these a lot lately. I love them. It's just so simple to color with these. The more you use them, and especially once you get the right combo of paper with them, I've been talking about that a lot lately, they just work so much better. So for me, it's this Canson XL watercolor paper. I find I get the best results with this. The colors move so much easier. I don't have to fight with them. I don't have to worry about them drying too quickly so you can't blend them out. So that's why this has become my go-to. So I thought this time I would experiment with stamping everything in black and not watercoloring it, because I've said that before. Watercoloring it gives you that little bit of a well and that barrier between each image. So it's a lot easier. You don't have to worry so much about your colors bleeding, anything like that. But when you've stamped like this, you do want to make sure one area is dry before you go on to color the next area. Otherwise, the colors are going to bleed into each other and you're going to have a mess. So I did each area at a time, generally using one color at a time, and then would move on to the next area away from what I just watercolored, just to let everything completely dry. I have super sped this up. This is roughly like 8 times faster than what it normally took me, but even then it didn't take that long. It's just fun to kind of sit down. With these, you just scribble down a little bit of color and then pull it out with your water brush. You can use a paintbrush as well, dipped in water. I prefer the water brush with these. It's just the convenience factor of it all. Plus dipping in water, then you're gonna have to, fiddle with the control and all that kind of stuff. So I just find this little water brush that I've been using works just fabulously. So I colored all my eggs. I was kind of going off of the color of the pattern paper that I'm planning on using. And then once I was done everything and the image was dry, I'm going around all of the edges with just a light blue. It's actually called light blue. And same thing, just pulling it out with my water brush. And again, even with this really detailed little water brush, it's not a big fat brush that can hold a lot of water. I can do entire backgrounds with this. And especially in this style, which I show quite often, I like just coloring around the image and then pulling that color out so it just fades away, and then I'm good to go. So I let everything completely dry again and decided while it was drying that I wanted to add some detail. So I grabbed my Copic opaque white and just put a little bit onto an acrylic block and then thinned it out with some water. And then I'm just picking it up with my marbling tool and creating just a bunch of dots on all these eggs just to give it all that extra fun little detail. And then once I was done with the eggs, I decided to add a few little highlights to these characters. And then I also grabbed my tiny little silver size 2 water brush here and just picking up that opaque white and adding just really subtle little highlights. You don't really see it too much. You can see it more in real life, but it's just a little bit of subtle detail. And then since I was in the groove, I decided to add a few more little hand-painted elements to the eggs just to finish them off. So again, let everything dry, which didn't take very long. And then I die cut some pattern paper from the Echo Park pack that again came in the kit, but I'll have links to everything separately. So I die cut that with the largest die from Simon Says rectangle die set. So this one's an A2 size die, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I grabbed a piece of Simon Says sour apple cardstock or green apple cardstock, and I used MFT's basic stitched scallop basic edges 2 dynamics. And I just used the straight one and die cut that on both sides, and then I cut it in half, added some adhesive, and then I'm going to apply that to either side of this little watercolor panel here. So I've got this cute little green scalloped and stitched edge on either side. I just thought it would give it that little extra bit of dimension. And then I grabbed some black cardstock just from my little scrap bin and treated it with my anti-static powder tool. And I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the set with Simon Says clear embossing ink, and then coat that with some detail white embossing powder and melt that with my heat tool. And then once that's melted, I'm going to use my paper trimmer to trim it. And when I trimmed it the first time, I realized I didn't eyeball it very well and had made the bottom thicker than the way I wanted it to be. So I just really, really carefully lined this up in my trimmer again. That's one thing I really like about this trimmer is I can use the little wire guide in it to see where I'm actually trimming. And then I just press down to hold everything in place, and I'm able to trim off like little tiny strips with this. So got that trimmed the way I wanted it, cut off each end, and then I'm going to just use my fingers to remove any of the anti-static powder that was still remaining on the cardstock. And then I decided to take my scissors and cut little notched edges on each end of this. So you just cut down the center, and then you meet each corner to each center with the scissors, and it cuts little flag ends. Super, super simple. Takes a little bit of practice the first few times, but after a while you just do it. And these little cutter bee scissors are perfect for that because they're sharp and they have such a good pointed edge. So now I'm going to just adhere my watercolor panel to the pattern paper with foam tape, and then I decided to adhere the sentiment with foam tape as well just to pop it up. So peeled that off, decided where I was going to put this on my card, and then once I've got this in place, I'm going to get my card base made. So it is some Nina Solar White 110 pound cardstock that I'd cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, so it'll be a top folding A2 sized card. Press that down really well with my Teflon bone folder, double checking to make sure this all fits properly, because sometimes I don't cut my card bases as well as I should. This time it just worked. So I'm going to adhere that to my card base with some more ATG adhesive. Got that completely lined up, and then I have to finish the inside of the card, of course. So I grabbed the bunny, and this time I inked him up with some Memento gray flannel ink. I'm going to stamp that on the inside of the card, and then I'm going to line up my sentiment. I said this when I did the unboxing video and showed this stamp set. I love the sentiments in this set. There's so many, and you can, mix and match them to create your own sentiment. So that's what I did here. I adhered or stuck a couple sentiments onto my acrylic block and then inked those up with the same intense block ink. So it says, "Some bunny thinks you're amazing." Stamp that below the bunny, and then as a final little touch, I just grabbed some of the little outline hearts from that same set and stamped them with Memento Rosebud ink, and that finished off my card. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post with pictures, as well as a picture of all the markers I used if you want to know the specific colors. I'll have links to all the supplies in the description box below, as well as on my blog, so check that out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!